Well, hello. My name's Sam Swearingen. I am the virgin host of Beyond the Chutes, as presented by ParaSight Systems. Today, we are recording from the rodeo grounds of St Tite, Quebec. Festival Western. What a wonderful facility they have for us here. It is just outstanding what they've done for us. It is a 10-day festival.
Yes, it is.
They got it named right.
Oh,
Festival.
Man. Festival.
It is very good. Yes. And I am doing something I have never done before. I am now the interviewer instead of the interviewee. And I am interviewing Doug Simcox. I heard that came from a movie from Hollywood Harris. So haven't seen it, but welcome, Doug. Glad you're here.
Well, good to be here with you, Sam. What a great adventure we are having. BTC on the road, right? Beyond the Chutes. And I got to say, before I move on, beautiful shirt you're wearing. Rawhide red. For our listeners, rawhide red. Over your right. Can you tell us what's over your right?
The BTC logo in black.
Yeah.
The rawhide colors.
Yeah.
We had silver in there also, but red and black were pretty much the rawhide colors.
Absolutely.
So, Doug.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you a little bit about what your background in life is. You know, you're from Iowa.
Yeah.
And growing up there in the big farming state, more corn is grown in Iowa. In one county, a farmer told me, than is grown in all of New York State, and there's a lot of corn in New York State. So it is the breadbasket of the United States. Yep. So let's hear a little bit about your history and what you've done and where you came from.
Oh, wow. Great big question. I love this. Grew up, as you said, in a very small farming community in Iowa. Actually, in a small town called Hartford, Iowa. There were 32 of us in our graduating class, just to give you a perspective of the size of the class. My father grew up on a farm. His father was a farmer. Back in the 50s, mid-50s, they were farming 400 acres. So stock cows and feeder calves and pigs and corn and beans and hay and all of that. So I learned very early the joy of farming. My father had a small farm. But when my father graduated in 1955 from high school, his father says, "I'm done farming. I'm retiring. I'm moving to town."
And your father then took over the farm?
No. My father, where would you get the wherewithal, right? It was a rented farm. Okay. How do you get started in farming? Which was the age-old question when I grew up in Iowa. When I grew up, a lot of my classmates, their parents made a good living on 160 acres.
And that was going to be my question. Farming 400 acres in the 50s was huge.
Huge.
Because the farmsteads were between 80 and 160 acres is what the government would give people for farmsteads.
Yeah.
And 400.
Yeah.
That's a lot of ground.
And it's a really interesting story. My grandfather had two boys, one 3 years older than my dad. And they divvied up the work. There was chores to be done. There was cows to be milked. There was fields to be plowed. And imagine plowing with an AC Alice Chalmers 2-bottom plow, right? And covering all the acreage. Now, that, I don't know, they might have had 240 acres in tillable. Mm-hmm. Okay. Might have had 80 acres in hay ground. They might have had that much in pasture. I don't know the exact mix, but my grandfather said with the corn, you either haul it to town or you walk it off, meaning you feed your cattle, you feed the pigs, right? And everything was harvested in the ear at that time. There was no combines.
Right. You put it in corn bins, the ears with husk on them or off. It didn't matter, so they'd dry so it would keep through the years. There was no bins with shelled corn going in them. the tractors and the equipment you used. Yeah, I kind of know what it's like, those old Elsheimer 45, WD 45s,
WD-45, absolutely.
M's, the international M's, riding them across rough plowed fields. It beat on your body.
Oh, it did.
And those guys just kept going, and it's kind of that. And when he says tillable ground,
Yeah.
for the people that don't know, that is about putting corn and soybeans and that kind of crop in, as the hay, which stays for a number of years, especially back then. Yeah,
absolutely.
now they keep alfalfa in for 3 years and change it. But back then, they probably kept it in 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. And there was rotation on top of that, too, right? Mm-hmm. There was no fertilizer. There was no chemicals. And you farmed 365 days a year, meaning you have the whole hurry of the spring, right? You get your corn planted. By the time you get your last field planted, it's time now to start cultivating.
Yes, and it was all on a schedule.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And how times have changed.
Yeah.
It's still on a schedule, but they rotate in different things through the winter that they do. Cover crops, which was probably never heard of then.
Yep.
But they are going back to the rotational. Like I'm looking into some for feeding cattle, where they're going back to what the buffalo did.
Yes.
They run it over there, a huge number on a short period, and eat the grass right down and fertilize it themselves. Move on.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at trying some of that in the next couple of years. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting how everything evolves.
Yeah.
And, So anyway, Doug, you got doing some rodeos later in life.
Later in life. But let me back up a bit. Rodeo was kind of always in the background of what we did. So when my grandfather moved off the farm in 1955, my father knew he couldn't farm, went to work at John Deere's, and the first strike they had, which was just a few months after he started, they went on strike. John Deere did. Well, how do you feed your family, right, when you're on strike? So he had two uncles at the time that were cutting hair. So he went to barber school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Farming to barber school.
Absolutely.
John Deere factory to barber school.
Absolutely. And he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he had no interest in working in a factory.
Oh.
Zero interest in doing that.
Just to survive.
Yeah.
That was a survival
Absolutely.
technique. Absolutely.
And he went to work for his uncle in Waterloo, Iowa. And I'm going to say that's when he got into the entertainment business. Because I heard my whole life how important it was to have great conversations with the folks that are sitting in your chair. You might have 8 people sitting in the chair waiting for a haircut. Everybody needs to be entertained. Okay? It's part of the process.
Which today, those 8 people would be sitting on their phone being entertained.
Absolutely.
They don't have that connection of one-to-one connection to know what they're doing. They're on their phone.
Yeah.
Eliminating the rest of the world.
You bet.
And not always for the better.
No.
So that's very important here in life. But with your rodeo in 1963, you did what?
Well, I might be in 1963, and this is my earliest memories. It's my memory of my father going to maybe Grundy Center, Iowa, which was probably 40 minutes from where we lived at the time. And he decided he wanted to try bareback bronc riding. And I know it was the first time he ever got on a horse at a rodeo. And it was a Bob Barnes rodeo.
Which we both have had connections with through the years.
Absolutely. So the Barnes family, absolutely. And I don't think it lasted very long. I can't remember a lot. But what kind of came from that, and let me back up a little bit. When my mom and dad, when they were when they were young, and they come off the farm, both of them came off farms. My grandfather got into riding club, horse riding club, saddle club they called it, Beaver Valley Saddle Club, and they were organized rides, you know, and they'd ride along the Beaver River, and it just was a super social thing. They didn't grow up on horses. Nobody grew up on horses, and my parents got very into. My father was a great athlete in high school. I mean, a super athlete in high school, so super competitive and needed something to kind of scratch that itch. And he got into horse showing. And I mean hardcore horse showing. 2 horse shows a week.
Wow.
Oh, no. I mean, and he's working, right, 6 days a week or whatever it was. And they were barrels and poles, and they were flags, and they were rescue racing. And both my mother and my father went. And my grandfather, who at that time built an arena at his place in New Hartford, Iowa, out by the railroad tracks, right? Had probably 6-7 acres, and they put up an arena.
Instead of corn.
Instead of corn. Exactly. Instead of corn. And story goes, he was in the scoop shovel race with my father, and the instruction was, put me on the shovel, don't look back. And what it is, the scoop shovel is an old grain shovel, aluminum grain shovel or whatever it was, tied to a lariat, tied to the saddle horn of the horse. And there's a single barrel, right, up at the end of the arena, and you ride up as fast as you can, go around that barrel, and whoever goes up and makes the loop fastest wins.
Yeah, and actually I've seen that done a few times when I was very young.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining because they can flop and roll pretty good when they spin around there, but it is yeah, for our listeners, there's probably not very many people still alive that have heard of the scoop shovel race.
Absolutely. and pre helmets,
pre anything,
and the instruction was, go as hard as you can, don't look back, I'll be fine. And the story goes, right, and they did it, and they won lots of horse shows. And one time, I couldn't even tell you the place. One time, my grandfather Ned was on the scoop shovel, and a wreck ensued, and he tumbled, and I think maybe cracked or broke some ribs, and that was the end of the scoop shovel racing for him. He kind of retired at that point.
Now, saying that, I did see at one of the big rodeos up in Canada or out west, they do the hide race. It's the same scenario, just a lot more to hang on to than a scoop shovel.
Oh, my. And you come around the corner, you're not following the horse. You're out there like a skier behind a boat.
Exactly.
Okay? And you're getting slingshot around there. And the instruction is, don't look back, just go.
And now, at the rodeo that the Barnes family was putting on there, you were a young lad.
Yeah.
Knowing they've had such an impact on the rodeo world, you know, just went everywhere.
Absolutely.
The work they have put into their business was incredible.
You bet.
Did you get to meet them then, or was it later on in life when you got to
later
know?
on in life?
Okay.
We were in northeastern Iowa, Cedar Falls, Waterloo areas where I grew up. They were in the northwest side of the state, up around Sioux City, Cherokee, Iowa is where they're from.
Okay.
And that's, in those days, probably 3.5 hours away. Okay. But over the years, much later, when I was rodeoing, got to know Marty and John and Bob, and just what a great family, and really enjoyed them.
Yeah, and some of the things you don't know is I have a lot of family background from Iowa.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my grandfather lived there when he was a young boy.
Really? Okay.
I don't know where and it must have been up north because there's still relatives in Minnesota and Wisconsin and out in that area.
You bet.
But
you bet.
Originally, I think the family was from Iowa.
Yeah.
And why they had moved from the corn state to New York, I don't know, but it happened, and that's
for sure.
It's all good.
Yeah.
So so your horse showing days was more with your father, or you took on?
I did. So my grandfather starts this arena, has horse shows and pick up what I would call in today's world probably pick up rodeos. Oh, you got a horse that'll buck. You got a bull or a cow or a steer you think will buck, and they would put on the rodeo. I mean, I can remember them building the wood chutes. I can remember my grandmother on the announcer stand that was up above the chutes, singing the national anthem, and my grandfather was the announcer. And I can't remember a lot of it, but yeah,
and we tapped into that in life. You became your grandfather and announced rodeos.
Yes,
and
one of my favorite things now, whether it's true or not, the lore goes, the story goes, I was known to be a talker when I was growing up as a young lad in Iowa, and the story goes we went to an auction, and supposedly, the story goes, I was saying, can we go eat? Can we go eat? Can we go eat? Right? And my grandfather said, yes! And supposedly bought a calf during the auction. I remember that. And he said to me one time, if you ever get paid for talking Doug, you're going to make a lot of money.
Well, I don't know if you made a lot of money, but you still talk good.
I've done a lot of talking, and that's absolutely for sure. So my introduction to rodeo, I was maybe 3-4 years old, and they had a calf, and at my grandparents, it's during a rodeo, pick up whatever it was, nothing terribly organized, and one of those where you back all the pickups and the cars around the arena to watch the show. And they put me on a calf. And back then it's 2 hands, right? And I was told lean forward. and I didn't probably go maybe a jump and a half, and that might be an exaggeration. Maybe I only went a jump. And I remember, as the story goes, my dad's uncle came to him and said, don't you ever do that to that boy again. Don't you ever do that. So that was my brief introduction into that. Around that time, it shifted, and I got introduced to horses, had ponies. When I was 9 years old, I started training horses. Had a neighbor who had a POA, Pony of America, and my dad arranged for me to train him. That was my summer job. I got paid. It was a 30-day training program that he came up with, my father did. And when the horse went back, he'd stop, he'd nick rein, he'd back up, the basic stand while you got on, all that sort of thing. And I got paid, we charged him $30, $1 a day for me to ride that horse.
Thought you were rich.
I thought I was rich. And what am I going to do with all this? And every summer my father would arrange for me to have a horse or 2. But Slim, Pony of America, as time went on, the fellow that owned that horse, Keith Davis, he said, would you come show the horse for me? Would you, go into local shows? So I really ramped up the showing when I'm 9, 10 years old. Going to Pony of America shows, going to Silver Spur, which was in Hudson, which was a half hour away. Every Saturday night, every Sunday, you are somewhere, musical chairs, flags, all of that sort of thing. And Slim was a kind of a horse where you could do an all-day show with him, meaning you could show him in halter in the morning. You could show him in Western Pleasure and Equitation, and then we'd change out his bit, probably put him into something light just so he knew we're in a different game mode now. And this 56-inch horse, pony, would go out and run against some horses.
And that was kind of the mentality back then, because you didn't have 5 or 6 different horses to take to the shows.
No.
You had your one versatile horse.
Absolutely.
And that made them broke animals.
Yeah.
They got used.
Yeah.
And now they're broke for one thing.
Yeah.
And not saying all of them.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but the majority of horses are broke for what they want to do. They're like athletes, specialized. You don't put a linebacker out to be a defender against a wide receiver.
Yep.
They might help out,
Yeah.
But they're pretty much specialized, and that's the way the horse world has become.
You bet.
And
Slim was 10 times smarter than me at the time, right? But he could do it all. And we talk about learning and thinking on this program a lot, right? And I can remember I'm maybe 10 years old. I'm showing him in Western Pleasure. And of course you lope and you trot and you walk and you turn around and do it the other direction, and they move you to the center and you back up, and then you're dismissed if you're not in the top. And I kept getting dismissed, right? What do I know, right? And they would say, well, he's in the wrong lead. He's in the wrong lead, And I'm like, oh, okay.
What's the lead?
And funny you bring that up. That's exactly what it was. And I come back, and the fellow I'm showing it for, I said, Keith, what's a lead? And he tells me, and I'm like, oh, well, I can do that. But isn't that something without, making assumptions? Well, everybody knows what a lead is. Well, I didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Right. And you just got on and rode.
I just got on and rode. I absolutely did. So continue to train horses and that sort of thing. And I think I was 12 years old and I bought Slim. I paid $350 for him. I've got the POA papers. And $350, I remember I had $300. I had to pay $350. I don't remember where the other 50 came from. But we continue to show him, and one of the highlights of Slim, there's always horses that stand out. In Kathleen's generation, it's of course Sister, correct, the horse we got from you. But I remember it was a Saturday night, and I'd run barrels already. I'd done everything already, and just the energy was up. I don't know what it was, and because of the way they'd classed the show, I had to run against horses. I had to run against the adults. And I remember it was just one of those moments that just absolutely everything clicked. I run into the arena. It's running poles. So you run all the way down to the end pole, and we just dropped in. We ran it back, come the other way. And as the story goes, there was a guy on the end of the arena sitting in his car that had turned on his lights, so we're running into the headlights. I don't know. But we end up placing second against some very top-notch people. And I would say that was the high water mark of my horse showing.
At 10 years old?
At 10, probably 12 at that point. Okay. But yeah.
Now, Little Britches Rodeo.
Yeah.
The more I hear you, the more our backgrounds are very similar. I wouldn't have known this until now.
Yeah.
And did you get an opportunity to Little Britches or high school rodeo or anything of that nature?
Yeah, a bit. And there was no real organized, I don't remember Little Britches being around. There was no organized Little Britches Rodeo. High school kind of heard of, just wasn't around. And there wasn't a lot of rodeo people around me, okay? All the idea of rodeo I had, right, came from my father, right, came from his experience and knowing I wanted to do this. I can remember, maybe I was 9 or 10, we went to, there was a fair. So there's 99 counties in Iowa, okay? And each one typically has a fair. And there was a fair in the county we lived next to, which was Butler County. And it was up in Allison, Iowa. And I went up there and got on a calf and ended up riding the calf. Two-handed at this time, Sam. There was no one-handed stuff. There was no helmets. There was no flak jackets, no spurs, no chaps for sure. So we're riding. So I'm up there and win the calf riding. And just because I could, they had goat tying. And I get in the goat tying, son of a gun if I don't win the goat tying, son of a gun if I'm not the all-around cowboy of that particular single day rodeo. So when you talk goat tying, I get it.
So you were the king that day.
I was. Oh, that was incredible.
At that age, you're invincible.
Invincible. And yeah. I don't know if it paid money. I don't know, but it was, yeah. But that was kind of my exposure. And so go back to showing horses. I'm a freshman in high school. And somebody says, hey, are you going to go to the high school rodeo? You ask about high school rodeo. And there's a high school rodeo. I think it might have been the state championships, state finals. I don't know, down around Des Moines or something. I can remember going to the Burkholders. If it's 2 nights before, I might have been lucky before I went. And he showed me how to put a rigging, which was my dad's soft-handled bareback rigging. He showed me how to put a rigging on the bronc he had loaded. And he talked to me about all the things I had to do, put me on it, probably went a half a jump, maybe a jump, I don't know. That was it. And I get on a Greyhound bus, and I drive 3 hours or 4 hours, whatever it was. This Greyhounds take longer. I get on a Greyhound bus and end up at the high school rodeo.
So tell me about the Burkholders. That interests me.
They were a local, I say local, probably an hour away. And they were big in rodeo. They were contractors and that sort of thing. And they would, they had livestock.
Okay.
So I was able to get with them, and and that was my introduction, Sam. You know, now not quite the same as yours, where you went out and got on a saddle bronc for the very first time at the high school finals, right? Not quite like that, you know, or you didn't have a saddle that fit, or whatever it was. But I didn't know anything. You know, what do you mean lift? What do you mean what? Bark them out. What do you even talk back to the lead? What are you even talking about?
Yeah, and once again, the similarities of the past have come about. But getting back to whatever you wanted to do in life, I guess you're an accountant by trade. So when did you go to college? What happened between 12 and 20?
Yeah, great question. So when I was a freshman in high school, again, New Hartford, Iowa, 32 of us in our graduating class, and there were a few avenues that you really, really looked at. Go farming. Right. Well, what are your connections? Do you have a family that farms? Do you have a neighbor that'll start you? What do you have from a farming standpoint? Go to work at John Deere's. Right. And those were the two main avenues. And I made a decision to go to college. Right. First in the family to go. This wasn't. Right, this wasn't a long line of heritage.
Farm boys just either went to the farm or went to work.
Absolutely,
and college wasn't an option for a lot of them.
Right, and I desperately wanted to farm. I love farming. I worked when I was 10 years old. I was hired by a guy who was baling hay all across the county, and I was hired and I shuttled loads because I knew how to drive a tractor. So I wasn't stuck in the mow. I wasn't stuck on the hay rack. I was able to drive and stand in the fresh air. Okay, on those 90 days, and you know how warm it gets in a hay mow.
Yeah.
So I hired out pretty early. Went to work for a neighbor who farmed 700 acres at that time. So we're talking late 70s at that time. But anyway, backing up a bit, I had it's all about relationships and all about people and people seeing things in you or giving you advice at the right moment that was crucial in decision making, right? And I was fortunate. Fortunately, I didn't want to take home Mac, and they had an offering which was typewriting. I could take typewriting. Now, Mrs. Amling taught the typewriting. And all manual typewriters. They had electrics. So they wouldn't let me on it because I messed around too much with them. But you learned to type, right? It was all about words per minute and all that. I took typewriter one semester. The next semester I took typewriter 2. Then we got into business machines, which are adding machines. Again, there was no calculators.
Abacus.
abacus, right?
Back in your day?
Absolutely. You had the 10 key, so I learned the 10 key and that sort of thing. And I was probably a junior in high school, and Miss Sandling says, I offer a bookkeeping class. I think you might be interested in it. And it was a package you got. It was a semester long and had checks and deposit tickets, and you could keep the books and all that sort of thing. And I said, this is pretty cool. I really, really like that. So was able to go to school. Dad paid the way for the first couple years and decided I wanted to go farming. Okay. Desperately wanted to go farming. I was raising some hogs on the side and that sort of thing. Had an opportunity come up and just desperately loved the idea of farming. Loved equipment. Just forever.
Got a question for you, Doug.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did your dad think about paying the way to go to college to be a farmer? Because back then you didn't go to college to be a farmer. You do now.
No.
You do now, but then you didn't.
I can only imagine. I do remember he wasn't terribly happy with it, for sure, but I think he understood.
Okay.
I think he understood. And I don't know, it just was something that was so interesting to me. Just so, it's a lifestyle, right?
And back then,
Yeah.
you didn't say, okay, go live your dream.
Yeah.
It's survive, make
That's
a
right.
living,
Right.
take care of your family.
You bet.
It doesn't matter what you got to do.
No.
Now it's more, you look at it and say, go live your dream. We'll help you live your dream the best we can.
Yeah.
But go live your dream.
You bet.
So
You bet.
it's a different mindset now than what it was back in the
Absolutely.
70s and 80s. It's, okay, what are you going to do to make a living, to survive? My grandfather always kept asking me that when I was young.
bet.
What are you going to do to survive? So your dad paid for college for
Yes.
a couple years.
2 years. Yes.
Now you're farming.
Yes.
How'd that turn out?
I farmed for about 3 years and went broke. It was during the early 80s, when everything was shutting down.
Farms were dropping.
Farms were dropping.
Bankrupt left and right.
And I'm swimming upstream, okay? Knowing now what I know then, or knowing then what I know now, you're swimming upstream. I mean, you're borrowing money at 18%, whatever it was, crazy stuff. Loved hogs, loved raising hogs, loved riding on tractors and equipment, just always did. And it was the idea that I really was chasing. Economics weren't there, but boy, learned so much in that time period that sometimes just hard work,
doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just isn't
It just
enough.
doesn't. Sometimes it's against you from the start.
Yeah.
And they can say what they want, but just work and try sometimes doesn't cut it.
And I think back on those times and think, could I have been smarter? Could I have tried something different? Should I have been milking cows instead? And I'm not a cow milker. I'm not built that way. I've milked enough cows to know I'm not a cow milker. So met Laura, my wife, on a blind date. We got married 9 months after we met, back to school.
She must still be blind because you've married above your pay scale,
Absolutely.
let me tell you.
Absolutely. Many
Wonderful
people
woman.
said, that Doug, he's a social climber. That's for sure.
No, a wonderful woman.
Oh, absolutely.
Blessed to meet her.
Blessed to meet her. And, we met when I smelled like hogs, and not a lot of future was sitting in front of her. But we got married. We moved to town, went to school, went back to school, got serious about things, and ended up graduating from college in 1985. And in 1985, nothing going on in Iowa. Farms were collapsing. John Deere's had severely reduced its size, severely cut back, and said, where are we going to go? And in 1984, we had gone out and visited Laura's family who lives in New England, who lives in New Hampshire. And I can remember loading everything we had in the car, and probably 2 weeks before that, do we go to Phoenix, which happened to be coming on at that point. A lot of folks from Iowa, college guys, college gals were going to Phoenix. That was kind of an area that was growing. And we decided to go to New Hampshire.
So, yeah, hindsight being what it is, you go to Phoenix and buy land.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
What it would have done. But as the world turns, you went to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And did you get a job in accounting there, or did you
Yes.
move on?
Answered an ad in the paper. The only time I've answered an ad and gotten a job in my entire career, and I've had a wonderful career. So went to work for a company up there, 1986, January of 1986. I can remember, and the historians out there will have to figure out the date, but I remember it was the date that I started, was the date that the space shuttle blew up.
Oh.
Okay. And the reason that stands out, the teacher, Krista McCullough, was from New Hampshire. She was a teacher from New Hampshire that had gotten on there.
Yeah. Very sad day in our history.
Absolutely.
Beautiful lady.
Yes.
That,
Yes.
There was, 7 people?
Yes. All
Yeah.
perished.
Just
in a snap
instantly.
of the fingers. Absolutely.
Yeah. You watched it live happen,
Yeah.
and it was like, wow.
Yeah.
It just, wow.
Yeah.
These people are gone instantly.
Yeah.
Vaporized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a sad day.
Sad day. And what a perspective, and as sad as it is, what a perspective to hold when we think we got problems.
Yeah.
Like a snap of the fingers. It can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to this day, snap of the fingers and it's over. Your
Absolutely.
life has changed.
Absolutely.
For the worse and sometimes for the better.
Absolutely. And I will say, if you just I've listened to your story and Mike's story and all the stories, there's all these intersections or whys that we come up to, forks in the road, right? Well, if I go left, do I go right? And thank goodness we've taken those turns, I say. And you got to wonder sometimes, where would we be had we not? And just how things unfold.
Yeah, it's almost like, did I go the right way? Did I go the wrong way?
Yeah.
It's the way you went.
It's the way we went.
And probably God's plan
Yeah.
to go that way
Yeah.
and see where you end up.
Absolutely. I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
And I also believe there are no accidents, right?
Well, in theory, in the rodeo world, I say, if you're meant to win, you're going to win.
That's exactly
And if you're not, you're not.
Yeah.
And you move on from it the next day.
Yeah.
So getting back to the early 1990s.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when I met you.
Yeah. Yeah. And what led to that? We were living in Concord, New Hampshire at the time, probably 1989, and we watched a program on a local documentary or whatever about Pond Hill Rodeo. Right? I remember watching this one weekend. The following weekend, we're up there. It's a weekly Saturday night rodeo.
So can I say one thing here?
Yes, please.
It's almost like history repeats itself with your dad taking your mom to the rodeo with Bob Barnes's.
Absolutely.
You haven't been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And now
yeah.
you're back in it at age 25.
Oh, every bit of that, maybe 27. Kathleen is our daughter was probably 3 months old, right? So Ben would be, maybe 3 years old. Pack him in the back of the Jeep Cherokee. I don't even know if I had a rig in Sam. I knew I wanted to go back. I'm going up there. I don't think I even entered the rodeo, was able to get on. Didn't have chaps, didn't have just absolutely anything. And go up there and again, last 2 jumps, but I met a very important person at that time, which was Billy Porter. He was the clown of that rodeo.
A saddle bronc rider.
A saddle bronc rider.
Yeah.
And we just hit it off. And next thing I know, he's saying, you need to go meet Sam. You need to consider saddle bronc riding. They have a school in Attica. I think it was in the spring of 1990 that I roll into Attica, New York with zero knowledge of saddle bronc riding other than what I had watched on TV.
Yeah, I'm just floored by the same thing as your father. You got a boy that's 3-year-old, you got a daughter that's 3 months old, and you're going getting on horses. Oh, I would cuff somebody right now and say, "What is wrong with your mind, man?"
Yeah.
But look at where you've gone to. Look at the people, the connections. So now you come to the school that my brother and I are putting on.
Yeah.
The thing I remember most about it, the first one, was how helpful you were. At schools you do them once or twice a year.
Yeah.
So how prepared are you?
Yeah.
I was bringing the livestock, so I wasn't worried about that. And people there come with equipment that isn't equipment. It's something somebody gave them out of the old barn, and this is my saddle, and stuff's breaking, and so you got to fix it. And you were very helpful. So tell us about your adventures at the school and where you went from there.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I learned more in those 2 days than I could have ever absorbed in 5 years. Right? Everything from chute procedure to how to put a halter on. Just how to put a halter on a bronc in the chute. Well, seems pretty straightforward. Yeah, this is a pretty wild horse. This is a pretty crazy horse, and don't get your face too far over that horse's head, right? Lest you end up with a broken nose.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do you set the saddle? How tight do you put it? How far forward do you put it? How do you measure a bronc rein? Right? And the thing that I remember, there were 2 concepts that I remember. Number 1, practice perfect. You preach that from the day I met you. The second was the basics. What do you mean there's basics? What are you talking about, basics? Don't you just get on and hold on, right? And it was all about lift and tuck and mark him out and beat him to the ground.
Yeah, the basics of bark riding. Now, that has changed a little bit in the years.
It has,
You still lift.
Yeah.
The tuck has gone away.
Yeah.
They poke their belly out there, and Lord, I could poke a big belly out there now.
Yeah.
But it has changed minutely.
Yeah.
But still, you lift.
Yeah.
And you charge that front.
Yeah.
And you beat them to the ground. The physics of if your feet are in that horse's neck before it hits the ground, it can't buck you off.
You bet. You bet.
Sometimes it happens, but the physics of it, when you break it down the way I have in later years, which I never did it earlier, but those things still come true.
Yeah.
And you have to use them in the practice perfect. I'm glad you took away that, because practice is just practice, but if you practice perfect, it'll get locked in your mind. Absolutely. And then you can do it every time you get on.
Absolutely.
So,
and I can remember the mark out was everything for me. It's like, well, if I don't do that, why even get on the horse? Right? It's not going to matter anyway. Meaning, you might go on and ride the horse, but you're not going to get a score. So how can you mark them out? How can you be solid every single time? Where do you put your feet before you even nod your head? You taught us to grab a hold of the saddle with the free hand to keep yourself in position for that first movement, and then let go. So the saddle didn't leave you.
Correct. And that has changed.
Yeah.
I have seen a few of them do it, but very few do it now, because they're falling back and not trying to get to the front. They're leaning back more. But the mark out, you're exactly right. And I very seldom missed horses out because it's a 0.
Yeah.
You poke your chest out. You see the way I rode that horse, and the other guy's counting his money.
You're right. Yeah. No,
I see the way you did a good job.
Exactly.
Thank you. Here, look at this here. Do you see my envelope with the money in it?
Yeah.
So it's useless if you don't get the money.
Yeah. So exactly right. So we're living in New Hampshire, and I'm 5 hours away from anybody that's rodeo minded, if you will. I can go to Pond Hill for sure, but there's nobody next door to practice with or to talk about or have that mindset with. And went around and rode APRA stuff, would get on wherever I could, I remember driving to a Dave Martin rodeo just to get on. Can I just get on? Just trying to get repetitions, if you will. And then in 93.
Do you have the year right?
I do. I
Okay.
do. It's not 1992 like I thought. In 93, I met the Canadians. Okay. And I first met Sylvain Bourgeois, who's been on our show, right? He had just come back from the West. He's probably 10 years younger than me. Met him at a Lyle Sankey show or school that the PRCA, First Frontier Circuit PRCA, had put on. And they were putting emphasis on bronc riding and that sort of thing. So, okay, go get my PRCA permit and meet Sylvain, and we just clicked, just hit it off. And if you listen to that episode, he'll claim that we traveled together for 4 years. It was closer to 2 weeks out of a single year, but we did some pretty cool things. It was my first real rodeo trip. I remember there were 4 of us piled in my old van, and I think it was in like a 1983 Ford van, custom converted van, right? Had a bed and captain seats and all that stuff, so very, very cool. And we ended up we went to Boston Spa on a Friday night, and then we went to it was somewhere in Pennsylvania, and we could be somewhere darn near every night for 2 weeks, right? That included Attica, that included Gary, New York. It included, and at that time you were riding every night at Gary, maybe almost every night, because I remember there was one night we snuck off and we went to Jefferson, Ohio, and Sylvan won the rodeo in the bronc riding. What did he say? 28 points?
Yeah.
Something like that, which tells you what the rest of us were doing.
Yeah.
Right? But what a trip, right? We ended up in North Washington.
And can it go back to that?
Yeah.
The Barnes family from Iowa was putting on the Gary, New York Rodeo,
Yes.
plus the Jefferson, Ohio Rodeo.
Yes.
So the connection goes back to your home
Absolutely.
state.
And North Washington.
Yes.
And Gary, North Washington. Absolutely. So got to know them pretty well. The Barnes family, Marty, absolutely, and John. And ended up that year, but just a wonderful, wonderful memories of traveling with the French Canadians. Just wonderful memories. The next year, 1994, which ends up being my last year in competition, I had gone out by myself, connected with the Barnes, and I rode rodeo. You could ride fair nights everywhere across, all the way to Iowa from New Hampshire. Ended up in Cherokee, Iowa in 1994. Now, got to know the Barneses. I'd help them load stock. I'd help them, never pack panels for them. There was lines, I had the skill to pack panels, but I certainly didn't have the will.
Or the desire.
Oh, the desire. No. So I'll do a lot of things for you, but got to know them very well. Ended up in Cherokee, Iowa on a Sunday. Had my folks, I'd gone to my folks, they'd rode up with me, my sisters rode up with me, and I get there, and what bronc have I drawn?
Go ahead.
Boy Baloo, all right, the great
stud
of Boy Baloo. And Bob was there, they had him off in a pen by himself, he's a stud, they brought him in only for the day, kept him completely separated off.
And folks, I want to let you know this horse is big.
A big horse.
Pretty big blue paint.
Yeah.
And just, it's got to be intimidating. So go on with the story.
It was. And all of a sudden I'm a celebrity because I've simply drawn this horse, right? And I remember sitting on the ground working my saddle up, and Bob Barnes comes over and says, "So you drew Boy Baloo, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And I'm like, "Here it comes." And he said, "You'll do all right." And he walked away. So he never hassled me. He never harried me throughout all of it, throughout all my outs with him, right? Connections, relationships, it all matters.
Not who you know, but what you know or where you know or who knows you.
Who knows you? Exactly right.
Yeah, and my dealings with Bob, you always try, if you did your job and stayed out of his way and helped him,
You bet.
it was all good.
You bet.
You know.
You bet.
So,
So
okay, Boy Blue,
Boy
you're
Blue.
strapping your
And
saddle
I can
on
remember,
this big horse.
I set my saddle in, and there's 6 different sets of hands from the back of the chutes, from the arena, all setting everything, and it's just, I'm just like, dang, this
Never
is,
had so much help.
oh, perfect. This is, I can remember Derek Clark saying to me, the great bronc rider Derek Clark, he was there, and he says, here's the deal. Mark him out and get bucked off. Miss him out, and you might ride him. That was kind of the deal on him. Back to 1990, well, there ain't no sense me coming all this way to miss out a horse.
Right.
I might make the 8-second whistle, but I got nothing to show for it other than a 0 because you missed the horse out. And it was just surreal, Sam. You know, we talk about that zone. We just talk about almost watching yourself as it's going on. I put my feet down to pick up my stirrups, and there's 2 hands in there putting my, not mine, putting the stirrups on for me. And I remembered all the basics, you know, grab a hold of the saddle, hold on, and he reared out, right? That was his start. And if you can hold it, because there's so much power when he hits, if you can hold it, you can mark him out. Typically, they blew out, right, because of the power and everything. I was able to hold it, and I can remember going, dang, I'm riding this horse. And it was, I probably got bucked off at 6.5, 7 seconds, something like that. There's a little bitty picture that I got of it. You can just barely make out, right? But was doing okay, and bucked up. Just stub your toe one time.
Well, and my theory is you said, oh, I'm going to ride this horse.
I think
and
so.
that's where your mistake came in about.
Probably so.
Because they
Probably
don't,
so.
horses of that caliber don't need much help.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you thought about it,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
when it happened. The best ride, one of the best rides I had, I said, oh, what are they going to mark me? Slap me on the ground.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
but that is the mindset, you know, finish.
Yes.
Finish.
Where
and
were
then-
you? Where were you? You weren't with me. Where were you? No. Absolutely. High water mark.
Right. Lessons and,
oh my
and just incredible feeling.
Yeah.
I did it that far. I marked them out and I rode them that far. So now, Boy Blue. So you moved kind of, was he your last horse or?
No. So Road Boy Blue, he was the last, how to say this, the last uninjured horse ride that I made.
Oh, that
So-
you were uninjured, not the horse.
Yeah, not the
You.
horse, not the horse. So I'm in Cherokee, Iowa, and I'm headed back home, and I'd entered Uniontown, Pennsylvania, another Bob Barnes rodeo, and I remember hitting somewhere across the maybe Ohio, whatever. I called PRCA, and said, "What have I drawn? Oh, you've got this bronc, and we have this in the bull riding." And I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, we got you entered in the bull riding." I'm like, "No, I don't think so." And they go, "Do you want to protest it?" And I said, "No, let me find out what's going on." Okay, because I knew I hadn't entered. And I get there, and it's Marty Barnes, and he says, "Hey, I entered you in the bull riding. I didn't think I was going to have enough. We ended up with 10, 12 guys." He said, "We're okay, but I entered you just in case, right?" And I'm like, "Okay, not a big thing." He said, "Now we can draw you out. No big deal."
And let me explain
Yeah.
a little bit what Marty was doing. He was thinking they weren't going to get enough bull riders. So in order to contest it, they needed 5 guys.
Yes.
So if you can't contest it,
Yeah.
he's got a contract to have bull riding in his rodeo.
Yeah.
So if he puts you in, they can still contest it. You don't have to get on, but you're entered.
Absolutely.
I've done that in the calf roping at my rodeos.
Yep.
Believe me, roping calves, but that's where Marty's thought was.
Absolutely.
And it's just a business move.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
go on.
And he said, "We can draw you out." But he says, pretty good bull. Not going to hurt you. Pretty good bucker. I think you'd do all right. And I'm like, Marty, I haven't been on a bull in 15 years. I don't have a glove. I don't have a rope. I don't have bull riding spurs. I don't have anything. Oh, we can get you all set up. Not a problem. Do you want to ride them? And at that
Very
point,
helpful.
you talk about forks in the road, right? And I'm like, that might be kind of fun. I don't know. So the young man that I borrowed the bull rope from, so I'd done well in the bronc riding that night, and it started to rain. It started to rain, and it was so muddy, and they'd had demolition dirt. It was just a muddy, muddy pen by the time the bull riding came around. And young man gets on, he says, yep, you can borrow all my stuff, but I'm going to go first, right? And so he does. So he hands me the bull rope and his glove, and it's full of mud, and I think I put his spurs on. I don't even remember. And I'm like, what in the world am I going to do with this? How do I, right? And at the time, I'm riding broncs left-handed. So I ride my bull left-handed. Why would you mess it up? I remember John Constantinople, Goat, he's pulling me in the buck and shoot, right? And he's pulling me, and I'm like, now what do I do? And he goes, oh, my God, you really don't know how to ride bulls, do you? Meaning, how do you wrap? How do you do all this stuff? And he took the tail of the rope after he took the wrap and went across his hand, and then he would double it back and bring it back across his hand, the tail. So when you open the hand, there goes the tail, right?
Everything gone.
It was his thing, and I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. So nod my head, out I go. I ride the bull. The whistle blows. The whistle blows. Okay? And I go to get off, always having ridden right-handed. I go to get off to the right. What happens, it jerks me just enough to stop my momentum. I get up on the back of the bull butt, right? And he bucks, and I come down, Sam, straight like a lawn dart into the arena. Hit so hard it flashed white. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I get up, and Marty Barnes behind the buck and shoots, and he is laughing, having the time of his life. See, I told you could ride him. He says, you got to work on your get off. And he goes, I think you need to go to the ambulance. I'm like, why? And I had blood running down my forehead. So when I hit in the ground, I probably hit a fender off of a Lincoln or whatever they were doing in the demolition derby, gashed my head open, right? And my neck, I'm telling you, my neck. So I go to the hospital. They stitch me up, staple me up, whatever they did. I end up winning $300. I think the deductible was $250 for the hospital. But I'm in the all around now, except, oh yeah, Gary's coming up, Northwide, all that run's coming up. Go to the house and sit. And the only arrangement I had made when I started rodeoing, the only agreement I had made with Laura when I started riding was no bull riding.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you forget about that when you said you'd get on?
I was feeling pretty heroic when I got on. Yeah. No, I don't think that, yeah. So forks in the road, right? So I sit out. Right, and I miss Gary, I miss North Washington, I miss everything. I'm in the standings pretty decent because I'd had a pretty good spring, pretty good early summer. And I decide, Labor Day weekend, I decide to go to Rochester. Syracuse, to the fair.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was my first ride back. And made a pretty good ride. I don't think I placed, but felt like a first ride back. You know, I wasn't sore. It felt okay. It felt like I was doing the basics. And we ended up that same weekend, I think that was a Saturday night, and we traveled to the Catskills to Andy Camp Rodeo.
Okay.
And I draw CA Smuggler, your bronc.
Okay.
Okay. And feeling good. I mean, I'm healthy. I'm feeling good. And I ride him. The whistle blows, and he starts to go down. I remember he's starting to fall. I grab my saddle to stay close to the horse as he goes down, catches himself and pivots me from the hard right side to the hard left side, and I haven't let go. And he launches me. And I can remember being in the air saying, tuck, tuck, tuck. You need to tuck. Meaning,
tuck and roll.
Tuck your head, tuck your head. And I hit so hard on my shoulder and my neck. I hit so incredibly hard. I remember I got up and I couldn't hear. And a steer wrestler climbs over the fence and comes and gets me and takes me out. And I can't hear, right? And my hearing did come back later, and so I ended up going home and I sat out till the finals. No more rodeos till the finals. Go to the finals, have an okay finals, and was able to qualify by process of elimination, because if you won the circuit or you won the finals, you got to go to Pocatello. And at that time, you know, I didn't win the circuit finals, didn't win the circuit, but was up enough that they said, "Oh, you're the third alternate
next in line."
Yeah, you're next in line. So, get on the plane, fly from New Hampshire to Cleveland, Ohio, ride in the arena south of the city, Richmond.
Yeah, where the Cleveland Cavaliers used to play.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rode there on a Saturday night, get on a plane and fly to Pocatello, and roomed with John and Marty Barnes.
Oh.
They were my roommates.
Who laughed at you when you hit on your head.
They did. So I ride my first bronc, and Jimmy Grasso is out there with me, and he says, "Doug, we can go to," and I rode pretty decent, you know, not going to set the world on fire from scoring and all that, but rode pretty good, was feeling good. And he said, "We can go to Sean Davis's school while we're out here." Right? Sean Davis, very, very famous saddle bronc rider.
Amazing. His story. Yep. Somebody should get that on here.
Yep.
His story is incredible.
Absolutely. We may want to reach out to him. Yep. Seriously.
Yep.
So anyway, we go out there, and I just wanted to meet him. Great guy. And he says, "Oh, sit in your saddle, show me." And I had spent months trying to just get everything mechanically right with the saddle. He goes, "Oh, you're riding too long. You need to shorten up." And I was riding a touch long, but the mechanics were working. I could, you know, I wasn't binding up. I wasn't shutting me down, you know, mechanically. And I'm like, okay. And change it. I don't even think I got on a bronc there.Maybe a bucking machine, right? So we travel back to 3-4 hours back to Pocatello, get on my next horse, and mark him. I mean, high flying, coming out, perfect, mark out, you know, bails out of there. At that point, I'd learned the finesse of hitting him at the top.
Okay.
All right, for the mark out, right, to hold him the best. Made a great mark out, went out there, couldn't move my feet, bucked off, landed on my shoulder. 2 days later, I'm walking through the airport carrying my saddle, and my right arm goes numb. And similar to what Eli's going through right now. Finally get to an MRI and everything, and they said, yeah, nothing ruptured, but one of your discs is protruding, right? And they said we can, and working with neurosurgeons, right, getting the right information at the right time, they were able to put me in traction and get rid of it over time. And when I say my arm went numb, that wasn't completely true. You ever hit your elbow?
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like. And I'm trying to work. I've got a career still, you know, trying to put it all together. And at that point made decision that's enough. So Pocatello was my last bronc. 1995.
And in Sean Davis's defense, they rode more that way.
They did.
It had involved to be looser,
yes,
and go, but
yeah,
I could never ride short because it was just like you said, it bound me up. It was like, and they must have turned loose or rode over top of the saddle a little bit. But what he did, he tried to help, but it was something that you weren't used to, and it changed completely.
Right.
And
right. But
So-
but I mean, lessons in life. What you were doing was working, maybe not perfect, but you'd learned the lessons that got you there. Learned that too short, I get bound up, just the way I'm built, just the way the saddle works, just whatever. Why would I change it? I'm 22 hours from home, right? Maybe more than that. Maybe 40 hours from home.
It's about 40 hours out to Pocatello.
Maybe 40 hours from home, yeah.
I drove it one time, flew it the rest. It didn't make sense.
Didn't make sense. So why would you? I don't know. One of those decisions, and probably in retrospect, thank goodness I did, or I wouldn't have been able to move on to the next elements.
So what was your next thing in life? What did you have quit riding bucking horses now?
Yeah.
Definitely quit riding bulls.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
now you go back to work and just
Well, I'm working the whole time through. Okay, I never stopped working. Used all my vacation time to go rodeo, to do that 2-week adventure every summer. Every summer, 2 summers. So went back to work. Absolutely. Tried to be a director. That representing First Frontier in the saddle bronc ride. Not really my style. And I think we'll do this in a future conversation. But thank goodness you and I had stayed in contact. Thank goodness we had the relationship. And yeah, so the next element was you calling me and saying, "Hey, do you want to announce a rodeo?" And I think your words are something. I'm probably paraphrasing. Do you remember what you said when you called me?
well, I believe it was something like, "You like to talk."
Yeah. You never shut up when we drove, so you ought to be able to do this. I think were your exact words. And I took that as a very positive sign.
Yeah. And what your grandfather said.
Channeled, well, he had passed away by then, but channeled my grandfather. Isn't that funny how things come round and round in this life? So the announcing is another story for another day. What a great career. What an exciting time.
And the announcing, I'm sure, let you meet lots of folks, lots of people.
Oh, my goodness.
And go places you wouldn't even have thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite frankly, after I retired, it's what led to the podcasting. You made a comment, I want to know, or who you know, it's who knows you. And I'm fortunate that I met a lot of really good people when I was announcing, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that. But these people are picking up the phone when I call them and say, "Hey, would you mind being on a podcast that we're just trying to get started?"
And personally, getting started, I think this has gone extremely well. And I appreciate you coming on here, Doug, and talking to me for the first time sitting in the boss's chair.
I know.
What an opportunity for me.
You have done an excellent job.
So, Mr. Dougie Doug,
Yes.
I hope you have a wonderful festival Western.
Yes.
And take away the people that you get to see that you haven't seen for years and enjoy what the good Lord has given us.
You bet. This year, like all the years associated with rodeo, we just make memories.
And this time in our life, we have the time to make more.
Isn't that great?
Yep.
Isn't that excellent? And again, thank you to Sylvain and PJ just for being such great hosts and inviting us up here, Sam. This is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and who knows where this goes. Now, after doing it, I can see a future of coming here and doing this
I agree.
for many years to come.
Yeah, and I think you being in the hosting chair a little bit more would really improve your game.
Well, I'm not getting on Bronx ever again.
Yeah.
And I'm not much of a talker or entertainer, but it's much easier when you know somebody and know
Absolutely.
what they've been through. And we'll have to go back sometime and look at the similarities of growing up between us at different parts of the country.
You bet.
But thank you so much for coming aboard here today, Doug, and
My pleasure.
we'll hope to bring it to the people.
Yes.
And
Take us home, Sam. Take us home.
well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Chutes. This is Sam Swearengin.
And Doug Simcox.
Thank you for listening.